We're studying through a series I'm calling Rise Up. This last Sunday, we were in 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 13 to 21. And we're gonna get into that passage here in just a minute. But before I do it, I want to thoroughly offend everyone. All right? And I mean that in all seriousness in some ways, and tongue-in-cheek in others. But I need you to listen really carefully. To all of my Democrat friends, you need to listen. To all my Republican friends, you need to listen. Our country is in a mess because of how we as a people keep acting. So last year, there were protests all over America that were rooted in people feeling they were being treated unfairly in life because of the color of their skin, being left behind, being judged differently, being treated differently. And it erupted in protests last year as we saw things that almost everyone was willing to say were unjust. But here's what happened. There were some people in those protests who began to do things that were not just. They began to burn down buildings and tear up communities and assault police officers who were there trying to protect their right to free speech. And what we saw is our president rapidly ran to the mic and began to denounce the lawlessness. He began to call for law and order, and he did it in some ways that were somewhat controversial and frankly harsh in many occasions because they lacked any empathy towards the crowds of people that were trying to express their opinions peacefully. It didn't seem to acknowledge them. At best, he gave a remark, and then he quickly moved to the law and order stance. On the other side of that was the national media, who ignored those who were burning down buildings and threatening our police officers, who totally gave any disregard. And we literally have a video of one reporter standing in front of a building that was burning down, telling everybody that it was a peaceful protest. We were told by the national media to empathize and to listen. And they were right. We needed to empathize and listen. Christian conservatives began to lump too many people into one ball of wax. They began to say that if you said the phrase Black Lives Matter, you weren't saying that a black man's life matters. You were somehow agreeing with this radical BLM organization that promotes communism and an agenda that is contrary to any biblical morality whatsoever. And so Christians began to cannibalize other Christians who were saying, hey, wait a minute, we need to listen to what these people have to say. These are our brothers and sisters in Christ, and they're hurting, and they're trying to tell us why. We would point to many, not we, I wasn't a part of that, would point to the protesters and say, all of those people are in the same lump with those who have no regard for law and order. Our president ran out and made a case for law and order. Now, fast forward to today. We have tens of millions of Americans who feel like their votes were wiped out. You may not agree with that. You may not think that their votes were wiped out. You may not think there was anything wrong with the previous presidential election. But tens of millions of Americans feel their votes were discounted or wiped out by what other states did. Whether you agree with them or not, that's how they feel. And so instead of the media coming along and saying, hey, these people feel disenfranchised, instead of the media coming along, what they did is they began to silence them. Anything that was brought up was laughed at, mocked, and simply swept under as a bunch of ignorant rednecks who don't know what they're talking about. And that they were jumping to conclusions that were utterly ridiculous. No one was called to empathize with anyone. No one whatsoever. As a matter of fact, we saw social media and Twitter doing things in this election that were absolutely insane. It happened to me. I couldn't believe it. I'm a pastor of a church in Dallas, North Carolina. I pastor it is the largest church in Dallas, North Carolina. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're nobody. I'm a nobody. And so I found myself on a plane in October before my shoulder surgery. I get on a plane and I have an N95 mask. The American Airlines steward tells me that N95 mask is not allowed, and he hands me a throwaway mask and tells me, this throwaway mask, that little cheap thing when you breathe, air comes out everywhere, this mask is safe, but that N95 mask isn't safe because it had a filtered deal on it. It wasn't a vent, it was a filtered vent. It's what my surgeon told me to wear so that I didn't get COVID while I was on the plane and could have my surgery, right? So I'm like, this is ridiculous. And he says, well, if you'll put the other mask over your mask, then you'll be in compliance. And I said, okay. So looking around, everybody in the plane is realizing how ridiculous this is. I decided to have a little fun with it, and I make a video and put it on Twitter. And I put the video on Twitter with me with my N95 mask and my, the little cheap throwaway thing that doesn't do anything, over top of my N95 mask that the surgeon wears. And I put that on there, and I say, Twitter crazy. American Airlines made me put the Twitter crazy. COVID crazy, American Airlines makes me cover up my N95 mask with a throwaway mask, right? And I clearly have it on. Put it up. Immediately, we start getting all these crazy comments, all right? Bam! Just like this. All of a sudden, all these crazy comments. There was all these crazy people jumping on saying I was, giving up my civil rights by wearing a mask, and I need to stop giving in to the man, And then on the other side, there was all these people saying, this young man understands the risk, and look what he's doing, and blah, blah, blah. It was hilarious. And so I'm showing my phone to the people on the plane, and they're all laughing, all right? They finally tell us we have to turn the phone off, and so plane takes off. When the plane lands, we couldn't wait to see the comments. And so I pull my Twitter thing out, and I start looking at it because we want to see these comments. I'm like, what are these people saying? These people are crazy, And so I open it up, and it's gone. Like, it's gone. I literally couldn't play the video. Twitter shut down a video of a pastor in Dallas, North Carolina, all right? Crazy. They locked it up for 24 hours before they finally realized I was making a case to wear 2 masks. So people, you need to understand, to my Democrat friends, conservatives are livid. They are sick of being silenced. To my Republican friends, minorities in America are sick of being silenced. But we don't want to hear it from one another. So today in Washington, D.C., there's a massive protest of people who feel like their votes were eradicated. Some of the people in that massive, peaceful event turned very unpeaceful. They start knocking over barricades, threatening the lives of police officers, storming in, tearing up property, showing a total disrespect for law and order. And our president was silent for hours. The president who stood up and told the minorities who were protesting about injustices in America that his first response within minutes of the protest was law and order stood silent for hours. Meanwhile, CNN showed a video of protesters up by the Washington Monument. Not the people who are tearing up the halls of Congress, but people who are out there with an American flag waving it around who feel like that their voice is being silenced. And called them traitors and terrorists. The same media who told us to empathize. So what do we as Christians do? If you're looking for hope in the media or Republicans or Democrats, you're going to be a very hopeless person. For Christians who are absolutely falling apart over the political condition of America, you need to ask yourself why. Why are you so angry? Why are you so disgruntled? Listen, I get angry about certain things. But why is it moving you to such a place where you're so bound up and so upset and so unable to love your neighbor? So unable to live life? Why are you in that place? The gospel has given us an ability to rise up. The gospel has given us the ability not to rise up and overthrow Caesar, but to rise up and live life and shine our light into a world that's unfortunately not doing anything new. Jonathan and I were talking about it. Election fraud is as old as elections. Biased media is as old as media. Media have been silencing people forever. Since there was a printed media, it's been used by politicians and people, and it is swinging constantly. So how do we as Christians rise up and live above this? To be a city on a hill, a shining light that points people away from the constant hysteria and hypocrisy that we see in media and politics on a daily basis. And if you don't see the hypocrisy, then you're stuck in it, all right? You're stuck in it if you can't see it. How do we rise above it? How do we live life? How do we say to a world and live in a manner that displays something that is truly free from this? That's what our passage takes us to. 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 13 through 21.